The auditorium erupted with cheers, flashing cameras and proud applause, but Evelyn Grace Whitmore sat in her wheelchair at the far corner of the stage, utterly alone. Her classmates ran into the arms of their families, embraced by mothers, kissed by fathers, surrounded by bouquets of roses. Evelyn, the disabled daughter of one of the wealthiest men in New York, had no one at her side. She clutched the edge of her graduation program with trembling fingers, her wide blue eyes scanning the crowd, searching for a familiar face. But her father, Jonathan Whitmore, had not come. The image was heartbreaking, her cap slightly crooked, her golden tassel swaying, her delicate shoulders stiff with the effort of holding back tears. In that moment, Evelyn looked less like the daughter of a millionaire and more like a forgotten child. And yet, in the shadows of the auditorium, another pair of eyes was watching her, eyes filled not with pity, but with quiet determination. That was Marianne Collins, the maid who had worked silently in the Whitmore household for years, unnoticed, underestimated, always moving in the background. But today something inside her stirred, as she saw Evelyn's loneliness on display for the world. Evelyn's story was not just about a graduation. It was about a girl who had lived in the shadow of her father's power, trapped by her own fragile body, and ignored by those who should have loved her most. But fate has a way of weaving unexpected threads, and sometimes the least likely person becomes the one to change everything. Could a maid, simple, humble, almost invisible, become the hand that lifted Evelyn from despair? Or would the walls of pride and wealth close tighter around the Whitmores, burying their hearts in silence? This story is not only about privilege and neglect, it is about courage, dignity, and the kind of love that grows in places nobody expects. You will discover hidden secrets, painful betrayals, and moments of redemption that will shake even the coldest heart. And as you listen, you may recognize pieces of your own life, moments of abandonment, of unexpected kindness, of second chances that came when you least deserved them. I'm John Parker, and today's story will touch your heart. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel and give your like, it's very important to me, and leave in the comments which city or country you are listening to me from. Marianne Collins had seen many grand events in the Whitmore mansion, gala dinners with crystal chandeliers, charity auctions where women in glittering gowns paraded jewels worth more than a year of her salary. But she had never felt the chill of injustice as sharply as she did in that crowded auditorium. Watching Evelyn sit there, isolated among her peers, Marianne's chest tightened with an ache she could not ignore. She remembered the mornings in the Whitmore residence when Evelyn would wheel herself quietly into the breakfast room, her books stacked neatly on her lap, only to find her father distracted with phone calls, business reports, and meetings. Jonathan Whitmore, the man whose empire of finance stretched across Manhattan, rarely spared a glance at his only daughter. For him, appearances and power were everything. For Evelyn, love was scarce, something she craved more than the applause of any stranger. Marianne had been a silent witness to Evelyn's world of absence. She had been there when Evelyn's mother left years ago, slamming the door with the echo of betrayal. She had been there on birthdays where the candles flickered out in silence because Jonathan's seat at the table was empty. And now, on this milestone day, Marianne knew she could no longer remain invisible. She adjusted her simple cardigan, her fingers trembling, and began walking toward Evelyn's chair. "Miss Evelyn?" Marianne's voice quivered, but there was warmth in it. Evelyn lifted her head, her eyes glistening with tears. "You are not alone," Marianne whispered softly, kneeling beside her. The girl blinked in surprise, her lips parting as if she couldn't quite believe someone had come for her. From across the auditorium, Jonathan Whitmore finally appeared, late, disheveled, his silver hair damp with the drizzle of rain outside. He stopped in his tracks when he saw the sight, his daughter clinging to Marianne's hand, the maid who should have remained in the shadows now taking center stage in Evelyn's life. A murmur rippled through the audience. Whispers floated like wildfire. "Isn't that the Whitmore maid? Why is she here with Evelyn?" Jonathan's jaw tightened. His pride stung. For him, the image was humiliating. For Evelyn, it was salvation. And for Marianne, it was the beginning of a battle she never intended to fight, but one her heart refused to abandon. because sometimes dignity does not come from wealth, but from the courage of someone willing to stand where others have turned away. Jonathan Whitmore's shoes clicked against the polished floor as he strode closer, his presence commanding attention the way it always did. People straightened in their seats, whispers turning into hushed silence. His tailored suit, though damp from the rain, still spoke of wealth and authority. But his eyes, cold, sharp, calculating, betrayed something else. Anger. Not at his daughter's loneliness, but at the audacity of a maid daring to fill the void he himself had created. "Marianne," Jonathan's voice cut like glass, "step away." His tone was low, controlled, but the venom behind it silenced even the nearest rows of graduates. Evelyn tightened her grip on Marianne's hand, her fragile knuckles whitening. For the first time, her soft voice broke through the tension. "No, Father, please let her stay." The plea was desperate, trembling, but it carried more power than Evelyn had ever shown before. Marianne felt the weight of it, her heart pounding as she realized Evelyn was no longer the timid girl hiding behind silence. She was standing up in her own way, against the man whose shadow loomed over her life. The moment was unbearable for Jonathan, a father with everything except the love of his child, exposed before an audience of strangers. He leaned closer, his whisper sharp enough to sting. "You forget your place, Marianne. You are staff, nothing more." But Marianne didn't flinch. Her gaze met his, steady, defiant. "With respect, sir, today she needed someone, and I will not apologize for being here when no one else was." Gasps rippled across the auditorium. The maid had dared to challenge Jonathan Whitmore publicly. Evelyn's eyes filled again, but this time not with sorrow, with awe. For the first time in her life, someone defended her openly, without fear. Jonathan straightened, his jaw clenched, his pride shattered. The humiliation burned, and yet beneath it a strange flicker of doubt crossed his expression. He had built towers of glass and steel in Manhattan, crushed rivals with a single call, but at that moment he looked powerless before his own daughter's fragile grasp on the hand of a maid. The ceremony continued around them, applause and cheers echoing as names were called. But for the Whitmores nothing was the same anymore. The lines had shifted. A war of pride and compassion had begun, one that would unearth long-buried truths and test the very core of what it meant to be family. When the ceremony ended, students spilled out of the auditorium into the drizzle-soaked courtyard, their laughter and shouts ringing against the brick walls of the school. Balloons floated, cameras flashed, and proud families gathered close. Evelyn remained at the edge, her diploma balanced across her lap. Marianne still by her side like an anchor refusing to let go. Jonathan lingered several feet away, his phone vibrating endlessly in his breast pocket, his fingers itching to answer. But his eyes locked on his daughter instead, torn between duty and discomfort. Marianne bent slightly, brushing a strand of damp hair from Evelyn's forehead. "You did it, sweetheart. You made it through." Her words were soft, but Evelyn's lips curved into a smile that was both fragile and radiant. For the first time all day she felt seen. "Marianne!" Jonathan called sharply, his voice echoing under the grey sky. She straightened slowly, shielding Evelyn almost instinctively. "You are finished here," he said coldly, his words meant to wound. "Pack your things tonight. I will not tolerate this performance." Evelyn's face drained of colour. "No!" she cried out, her voice startlingly loud. Heads turned in their direction. "If she goes, I go too. Do you hear me, Father? I won't stay in that house without her." The declaration pierced Jonathan like a blade. Never before had his daughter spoken to him with such fire. For years she had been quiet, obedient, accepting his neglect with silent sorrow. Now her defiance rang like thunder, threatening the fragile balance of his pride. Marianne touched Evelyn's hand gently. "Don't, Evelyn, it's not worth the fight." But her heart was breaking. She had grown to love the girl like her own, through years of whispered conversations at midnight, shared prayers before sleep, and afternoons spent painting by the wide windows of the Whitmore estate. Evelyn had become more than an employer's daughter. She was family. Jonathan's lips pressed into a hard line. "Evelyn, you are speaking nonsense. She is staff. You are my daughter. Do not confuse loyalty with love." But Evelyn shook her head, tears streaming down her cheeks. "No, Father. Love is the only thing I've ever wanted from you. And when you couldn't give it, she did." Her voice cracked, but her words carried into the stunned silence of the crowd. The whispers returned, stronger now, biting at Jonathan's pride. Imagine the maid means more than him. Even his own daughter knows he's cold. He turned away abruptly, his shoulders rigid, his face pale with humiliation. As the rain thickened into a steady shower, Marianne pulled a jacket over Evelyn's frail shoulders, her own eyes glistening. She knew this was not the end. It was only the beginning. For Jonathan Whitmore had been publicly challenged, and men of his stature never allowed such wounds to heal quietly. What neither Marianne nor Evelyn could foresee was that Jonathan's fury would uncover more than resentment. It would bring to light a secret, buried deep within the Whitmore family, a revelation powerful enough to shatter them all. That evening, the Whitmore mansion stood like a fortress against the storm. Lightning crackled over the Hudson, casting fleeting shadows across its marble columns and iron gates. Inside, the silence was suffocating. Evelyn had retreated to her room, her diploma still clutched in her lap like a fragile trophy, while Marianne sat at the edge of the bed, stroking her hair as if trying to shield her from the storm, both outside and within. Downstairs, Jonathan paced his study like a caged lion. The humiliation of the day replayed in his mind, the whispers, the stares, the image of Marianne Collins kneeling beside Evelyn, while he, her father, stood powerless. His pride was not just bruised, it was shattered. He slammed his whiskey glass onto the mahogany desk, amber liquid splashing onto old family photographs. One frame toppled, revealing a hidden picture tucked behind it. A younger Jonathan, smiling broadly beside a woman with dark hair and luminous eyes, Evelyn's mother. Her absence had long been a wound in the house, one Jonathan refused to speak of. He had buried her memory beneath layers of business, power, and denial. But now, staring at her face again, a whisper of guilt stirred. For Evelyn, her mother had been a ghost. For Jonathan, she was a reminder of the one truth he had spent years trying to conceal. "Mr. Whitmore." Marianne's voice broke through the silence. She stood at the doorway, her cardigan soaked from the rain, her hands clasped in front of her. Jonathan stiffened. "I'll be brief," she said firmly. "Evelyn needs you. She doesn't need more gifts or tutors or charity events in her name. She needs her father. If you dismiss me tonight, you'll lose the only person she believes is on her side." Jonathan's eyes narrowed, his jaw tightening. "You dare come into my study, into my house, and tell me how to raise my daughter?" Marianne's voice did not waver. "Someone has to." The audacity left Jonathan seething, but behind his fury her words struck a chord he could not silence. He turned his gaze back to the fallen photograph, the face of the woman he once loved staring up at him, and then in a voice more fragile than he intended, he murmured, "You don't know the whole story, Marianne. You don't know why her mother left." Her breath caught. "Then tell her. She deserves to know." But Jonathan's eyes flashed with a dangerous secret. "If Evelyn ever learns the truth," he said in a low, trembling voice, "she will never forgive me." Marianne's heart pounded. The storm outside rattled the windows, thunder roaring as if to punctuate his words. She realized then that the Whitmores' greatest tragedy was not Evelyn's loneliness. It was the truth locked behind Jonathan's silence. A truth that had the power to change everything, for better or worse. Upstairs, Evelyn leaned against her pillow, her mind racing. She could hear the faint echoes of voices below, rising and falling, her father's anger colliding with Marianne's calm defiance. What she didn't know was that the storm was about to bring the truth crashing through the walls of their lives, tearing apart everything she believed about her family. The storm raged through the night, and with every crack of thunder, the walls of the Whitmore mansion seemed to tremble with the weight of secrets too long suppressed. Evelyn could not sleep. She wheeled herself quietly out of her room, her nightgown brushing against the polished wooden floor, her hands steady on the wheels though her heart raced. From the top of the staircase, she could see the glow of the study lamp and hear the muffled rumble of her father's voice. Marianne stood inside, her back rigid, as though guarding something fragile. Evelyn leaned forward, straining to hear, and then Jonathan's words cut through the silence. "She thinks her mother abandoned her. But it was me who sent her away. The words struck like lightning. Evelyn froze, her breath stolen from her chest. Marianne's gasp echoed her own. "Oh, you forced her to leave." Jonathan's shoulders slumped, his powerful figure suddenly smaller. "I gave her no choice. Catherine was in love with another man, someone I could never allow near our name. I told her if she stayed, Evelyn would be taken from her. So she left to protect the child. But I made sure Evelyn believed she was abandoned. It was easier to let her hate her mother than to know the truth of her father's cruelty." Tears blurred Evelyn's vision, her hands trembling against the wheels of her chair. The room below spun, her world collapsing with every syllable. Marianne's voice, though low, carried a sharp edge of disbelief. "You let her grow up thinking she was unwanted, all to protect your pride?" Jonathan slammed his fist onto the desk, but his voice broke. "I was trying to protect her, to protect the Whitmore name. You don't understand the cost of weakness in my world. One scandal, one betrayal, and everything collapses." Marianne stepped closer, her eyes burning with quiet fury. "And what about the cost to her heart? To a little girl who cried herself to sleep, believing neither parent wanted her. You built your empire on silence and lies, Mr. Whitmore, but it is your daughter who paid the price." Down the hall, Evelyn clutched her chest, her sobs silent but violent, shaking her frail body. The truth she had craved her whole life now tasted bitter, poisoned by betrayal. She wanted to scream, to storm into the room and confront him, but her voice was trapped in her throat. She spun her chair and retreated into the shadows, her tears falling like the rain that lashed against the windows. In that moment, Evelyn made a vow. She would uncover every piece of the truth, even if it shattered the fragile remains of her family. For too long she had lived in silence, but silence had given her nothing but pain. The storm outside howled as if echoing her resolve. Marianne, sensing the depth of what she had just heard, whispered one final warning to Jonathan. "Secrets like this don't stay buried forever. And when she learns the truth, it won't be your fortune or your empire that falls, it will be you." Jonathan turned away, his face pale, haunted. He knew Marianne was right. The storm inside the mansion was only beginning. Morning broke grey and heavy, the storm's remnants clinging to the skies over Manhattan. The Whitmore mansion, normally so immaculate, seemed unsettled, like the storm had seeped into its very foundation. Evelyn did not come down for breakfast. She sat by her window instead, staring out at the dripping gardens, her diploma resting limply on her lap. Her thoughts twisted with the words she had overheard. It was me who sent her away. Her chest ached with betrayal. The mother she thought had abandoned her had been driven away by the very man who claimed to protect her. A knock broke her reverie. Marianne slipped into the room carrying a tray, tea, warm toast, and a small vase with daisies plucked from the garden. "You didn't eat last night," she said softly, setting the tray on the bedside table. But when she looked at Evelyn's face, she froze. The girl's eyes were swollen, her expression hollow, her knuckles white as she gripped the arms of her wheelchair. "Marianne," Evelyn whispered, her voice hoarse. "I heard everything." Marianne's breath caught. She closed the door gently, her hands trembling. "Sweetheart, you shouldn't have—" "I know the truth now," Evelyn interrupted, tears spilling. "All these years I hated her. I thought my mother didn't want me. But it wasn't her, it was him." Her sobs cracked through the silence. "How could he? How could my own father take her from me?" Marianne knelt beside her, pulling Evelyn into her arms as best she could. "You deserved the truth, darling. And yes, it will hurt, but knowing is better than living a lie." The door swung open suddenly. Jonathan stood there, his face drawn, his voice rough from a sleepless night. "Evelyn," he began, but his daughter's glare silenced him. "You don't get to say my name like that," she spat, her voice stronger than Marianne had ever heard. "You lied to me. You took my mother from me. Do you know how many nights I cried begging God to bring her back? And all this time she left because of you." Jonathan's shoulders sagged. For once the titan of steel and glass looked small, vulnerable. "I did it to protect you," he murmured, though the words sounded hollow even to himself. "No," Evelyn's cries shook the room. "You did it to protect yourself. Your name, your empire, your pride. Not me." Marianne's eyes darted between them, her heart breaking at the sight of father and daughter, torn apart by years of silence. She placed a gentle hand on Evelyn's arm. Sometimes love is buried under pride, Evelyn. But that doesn't mean it's gone forever. Jonathan swallowed hard, his voice almost pleading. I thought I was saving you from shame. From weakness. His eyes glistened with something rare, regret. But perhaps all I saved was myself. The silence that followed was unbearable. Evelyn turned her face toward the window, refusing to look at him. Marianne rose slowly, placing herself between them like a fragile bridge over broken ground. Mr. Whitmore, she said firmly, you have one chance to mend this before it's too late. But if you keep hiding behind pride, you will lose her forever. Jonathan looked at Marianne, truly looked at her, as though seeing her not just as a maid, but as the one person who had never abandoned his daughter. His lips parted as if to speak, but no words came. He turned and left, his footsteps echoing down the hall like a retreat. Evelyn's tears spilled again, but there was fire in her eyes now. I will find her, Marianne. I will find my mother, no matter what it takes. And with those words, the fragile balance of the Whitmore household shifted. The search for the truth had begun, and with it, the unraveling of every wall Jonathan had built to protect his empire of silence. The days that followed were tense, each hour heavy with words unspoken. Jonathan buried himself in work, disappearing into meetings across Manhattan, while Evelyn and Marianne whispered late into the night, plotting quietly. The mansion, once a place of rigid order, now pulsed with restlessness. Evelyn had made up her mind. She would not live another day blind to the truth of her mother's fate. One evening, while Jonathan dined with business partners in the city, Evelyn summoned Marianne to her room. Spread across her desk were scattered fragments of memories. An old music box with a chipped ballerina, a faded scarf with the faint scent of lavender, and most importantly, a worn envelope she had discovered hidden inside her father's library. The letter inside was yellowed with age, its ink slightly smudged. But the words were still clear. My dearest Evelyn, I wanted to stay, but I had no choice. One day you will understand. Never doubt that I love you with all my heart. Catherine. Evelyn's hands trembled as she passed the letter to Marianne. He kept this from me. All these years. He hid her words. Marianne's throat tightened as she read. The grief in Evelyn's eyes was unbearable, but beneath it there flickered something else. Determination. This is proof, Evelyn said fiercely. She didn't abandon me. She loved me. I have to find her, Marianne. Will you help me? Without hesitation, Marianne nodded. Always. That night the two began their search. Marianne reached out to old contacts. Her cousin who worked as a nurse in Queens, a friend from church who knew people across the state. Evelyn, limited by her wheelchair but unyielding in spirit, combed through old yearbooks, social records, and anything she could access online. The trail was faint, but one clue emerged. Catherine Whitmore's maiden name, Catherine Wells. Meanwhile, Jonathan felt the walls of his empire closing in. At a board meeting, his focus wavered. His closest advisor, Gerald, leaned in and whispered, Jonathan, people are talking. They saw your daughter at graduation. With the maid. They're questioning your family's image. Jonathan's jaw clenched. The humiliation of that day had spread into the circles of power he guarded so fiercely. And worse still, Evelyn's defiance haunted him like a shadow he could not shake. When he returned home that evening, Jonathan noticed Evelyn's door closed, the faint hum of her laptop buzzing inside. He paused, listening. Snippets of conversation drifted through, Evelyn's voice determined and Marianne's soothing, encouraging. A wave of dread swept through him. He realized they were searching for Catherine. Storming into the room, Jonathan's voice was thunder. Enough, this ends now. Evelyn wheeled around, her eyes blazing. No, father. It begins now. She held up the letter, her mother's words trembling in her hand. Oh, you lied to me once, but you will not stop me again. Jonathan's eyes widened at the sight of the letter. His face drained of color, rage and fear colliding. He reached for it, but Evelyn pulled back. Marianne stepped forward protectively, her stance unyielding. You cannot hide her forever, Marianne said firmly. Jonathan's voice cracked with desperation. If she comes back, everything will fall apart. Evelyn's voice cut sharper than any blade. Then let it fall. At that moment, Jonathan understood. His daughter was no longer a child begging for love. She was a young woman demanding truth. And for the first time in years, he felt the power slipping from his grasp. The search stretched into weeks, each day peeling away another layer of secrecy Jonathan had built around his family. Evelyn's determination grew sharper with every lead, and Marianne's loyalty became unshakable. Together, they followed every whisper, every old record, every faint trail. And then, one quiet Sunday morning, Marianne's cousin in Queens called with a trembling voice. "I think I found her," she said. "Catherine Wells. She works at a small bookstore in Brooklyn. It's on Montague Street. She's been there for years." Evelyn's heart thundered. Her mother, alive, not vanished, not gone into the wind. Just a few miles away, living a life Jonathan had stolen from them both. That afternoon, Marianne wheeled Evelyn down the cracked sidewalks of Brooklyn, the smell of roasted chestnuts and rain lingering in the air. They stopped in front of a narrow storefront with faded blue paint and a crooked sign that read Wells and Words. Inside, the faint scent of paper and ink drifted out with the chime of the bell above the door. Behind the counter stood a woman with streaks of silver in her chestnut hair, her hands dusted with ink. She looked up and her eyes widened. For a moment time stopped. "Evelyn." The name left Catherine's lips like a prayer she'd whispered for years. Her hands trembled as she hurried around the counter, tears spilling freely. Evelyn's voice cracked. "Mother." In an instant, Catherine fell to her knees before the wheelchair, cradling her daughter's face in her hands, sobbing into her hair. Evelyn clung to her, her own tears soaking into her mother's blouse. "I thought you left me. I thought you didn't want me," Evelyn choked out. Catherine shook her head fiercely. "No, my darling. Not for 1 second. I was forced to leave. I wrote you letters. I prayed for you every night. But your father—" "I know," Evelyn whispered. "I know everything now." Marianne stood silently by, her own tears falling, her heart full as she witnessed the reunion she had long prayed Evelyn would find. For once there was no loneliness in the girl's eyes, only the glow of belonging, the warmth of being loved by the mother she had long been denied. But outside, a dark shadow lingered. Jonathan Whitmore stood across the street, watching through the rain-streaked window. His hands shook as he gripped the handle of his umbrella, his face pale as he saw Catherine's arms wrapped tightly around Evelyn. His empire, his carefully guarded image, his very legacy, all of it felt like it was crumbling in that bookstore doorway. Gerald's words echoed in his mind. "They're questioning your family's image." And now, with Catherine back, every secret, every lie, every scar he'd buried was about to be exposed. As Catherine pressed her forehead to Evelyn's and whispered promises of never leaving her again, Jonathan's eyes hardened. If Catherine returned, she wouldn't just heal Evelyn, she would undo him. For Evelyn, this reunion was salvation. For Jonathan, it was a threat. And the stage was set for the final battle between pride and truth, power and love. The bell above the bookstore door jingled again, sharp against the quiet sobs of mother and daughter. Jonathan Whitmore stepped inside, his presence chilling the warmth that had just blossomed. His suit was immaculate, his hair slicked from the rain, but his eyes, haunted, furious, desperate, betrayed the storm inside him. Catherine froze, her arms still around Evelyn. "Jonathan—" Her voice was low, laced with memories both tender and bitter. Evelyn turned sharply, her tears replaced by fire. "Why are you here? Haven't you stolen enough from me already?" Jonathan's jaw clenched. "Evelyn, you don't understand." "No." Her voice cracked like lightning. "All my life I begged for answers, for love, for something real. You gave me lies and silence. You took my mother away and made me believe she didn't want me." She pointed toward Catherine, her trembling hand steady with conviction. "But here she is. Her love survived even your cruelty. I understand everything now." Marianne, standing protectively behind Evelyn, whispered, "Let her speak her truth, Mr. Whitmore. For once in your life, listen." Jonathan's face faltered. His power, his wealth, his empire meant nothing here. He looked at Catherine, his voice breaking. "I thought I was protecting her. Protecting both of you. I built walls so high, but all I did was lock myself inside them." His hands shook as he reached toward Evelyn, but she wheeled back, her eyes sharp. "Love doesn't hide behind walls," Evelyn said, her voice steady. "It shows up, it stays. And it fights." Catherine rose slowly, her gaze unwavering. "Jonathan, you can't undo the years you stole, but you can choose now, pride or redemption. For the first time in decades, Jonathan Whitmore wept. Silent tears streaked his face as the weight of his choices crushed him. He fell to his knees before Evelyn, a titan brought low by the truth of a daughter's pain. "I am sorry," he whispered, his voice hoarse. "I failed you." "I failed her. If there is anything left in me worth forgiving, I beg it from you." The room held its breath. Evelyn stared at him, torn between anger and the faint ember of love that had never fully died. Slowly, she reached for Marianne's hand on one side and Catherine's on the other. Their touch steadied her. She looked at her father, her voice trembling but strong. "I don't know if I can forgive you yet, but I won't hate you forever. If you want redemption, prove it, not with words but with your life." Jonathan bowed his head, broken but hopeful. For once he had no power to command, only the chance to change. As the storm outside faded into a gentle rain, the four stood in a fragile circle, wealth and humility, betrayal and love, pain and the first glimmer of healing. The Whitmore's story was no longer one of silence and shadows. It was a story reborn from truth, carried by the courage of a daughter who refused to remain invisible. And as the scene closed, the narrator's voice rose warm and steady. "I'm John Parker, and today's story reminds us that love is stronger than pride, and truth more powerful than wealth." If this story touched your heart, don't forget to subscribe to the channel. Give your like and tell us in the comments which city or country you are listening from. Together we can keep sharing stories that bring hope and light. The screen faded, but the echo of Evelyn's defiance lingered, proof that even the most fragile voices can shatter the mightiest walls.